Hi, I'm Wendy, and this is Tim, and we're going to talk to you today about boat safety and boat preparation and what we do in our compounds to keep the boats from getting destroyed.
Okay, yep, we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about boat handling, how to tie them, how to carry them, how to drain them, and hopefully show you to the best we can on this very cool May day what we'd like you to do with our boats. Tying of the boats, whether it's an OC1 or it's a surf ski, or even at times with a paddle board, we will have bungees available for all of our boats. And the easiest way to tie them is to hook the bungee on the fence close to the post below what would be the high end of the boat when it's on the rack. Bring it around the racking and hook it back on. That's simple. If, for instance, the bungee seems a little bit loose, you can pull it tighter, loop it once, and then back on. And that'll secure the boat from the wind, side to side, front to back. If you were racking an outrigger, your AMA would be on the outside, and you can bring the bungee all the way around the AMA and then back onto the fence again. And the boats are always kept bottom up. Moving the boats from the racks, whether it's a surf ski or an outrigger, we want to have two people carrying at all times. With a surf ski, they all have a handle in the front and the back, so it's easy to get it off the rack. Put one hand on the handle, pick it up, slide it off, and slowly and carefully turn it over. If this were an outrigger, you wouldn't have the handles, so you'd have to be careful on how you carry it. As everyone is aware, all of our surf skis and outriggers have a rudder. It's probably the most fragile part of the boat. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of our rudder when we're rigging or washing or cleaning. You want to make sure that you prop the boat up above the ground so the rudder is not the main rescue. So we want to go over some of the parts of the surf ski and their uses. The first thing on our V5s, and we have a couple of them, they have a hatch in the back for storing. If you're going to go on a trip, you can put your lunch, your water bottle, whatever you want. It's a sealed compartment from the rest of the boat. That's only important when we talk about draining the boat. We have a leash, and all of our boats will have a leash on them. They're not to be removed. They attach between your legs. There's a little clip in the middle of the surf ski for the leash. It should be around your leg when you're paddling, and when the boat's to be stored, if it's a short leash, it can hook on a side handle. Some of the longer leashes, because they'll droop, you can just strap back onto the bungees so they're up and out of the way when you go to put the boat back on the rack. Surf skis also all have a drain. It operates by pulling it towards you when you're sitting in the seat. If your boat is not moving, water will fill in. As you paddle, the water will drain out. When you've rid yourself of enough of the water, you can close the drain and keep yourself a little bit drier. Some of these drains will leak very slowly, even when they're fully closed. These boats are designed to be moving, not sitting still. We're going to talk about cleaning, but this part's really important. If you look in this drain in close, and when you get a chance to get on the boat, you'll see that there's a seal. There's a little flap on the bottom. Victoria, maybe I'll just flip the boat so people can see what it looks like underneath when it's open. And then when it's closed, now all the dirt from your feet from your paddles, from pushing off, if you beached it, is going to end up in and around this drain. So it's very important when you're finished paddling and you're cleaning the boat that you make sure you get all the sand and dirt out of this drain. The next thing you'll notice is this little, people call it a drain. It's really an air vent. This should remain open all the time except when you're paddling on the water. And this is where you will drain any water out of the boat, should there be water in the boat. Pedal adjustment. The surf skis all have adjustable pedals. So when you find your comfort level, try and remember they're all numbered. Well, actually, I'm sorry, the V5s aren't numbered. But you'll find a spot. There are two little pins, one on each side, that grip the paddle or the pedals. You pull them, they're both closed, and you can slide this paddle platform back and forth. Once it's locked into place, on the V5s, you have this little bar to help adjust the paddles and take up the slack. It's pretty easy to do. And again, it's got a Velcro foot strap, which you may choose to have tight or loose, but it's just one of the few things that you have to do once you come off the water is check to see if there's any water in the boat. Our surf skis and some of our outriggers are sealed hull, some of them are open cockpit. So there's slightly different ways to drain the water out. In the surf ski, it's a good example of a complicated water draining procedure. As you can see, the shape is odd. The hole where you're going to drain the water out is when the boat's right side up, is up fairly high. So it's going to be the lowest point when this boat is upside down. So if Wendy and I were to turn this over and there was water, whether we're holding it or we have it on the rack, the water should come out. Except that there are pockets behind the seat where water could be trapped. So we want to make sure that we get all that water out. So the way to do that on the surf ski is when it's right side up, lift the back end, let all the water drain into the front, and while the back end is still lifted, we're going to flip the boat around and let the water drain. In our open cockpit OC1s, like the teal one and the red and white one, you're going to be able to see where that water is. There are compartments, so you have to feel for the water, open the drain, make sure the water is all moved to one end, the end where the drain is, flip it over and let the water out. The Amas tend to fill up with water even more than the boats. Some of it's just condensation, and some of it is there's a leak or it gets in through some of the drain holes that we actually have. So, as we mentioned with the plug on the surf ski, same is true of the outriggers. If it has a plug that does not have a straw or a tube through it, you need to remove that plug when you're racking the boat. What happens if you seal the boat, you've come off of cold water possibly, and now you're putting the boat in hot air, and as we all know, hot air expands. If it expands enough, there have been stories, I haven't seen it, but I've heard stories of OC1s just blowing up on the beach.
Same as inflatable.
Yeah, inflatable SUPs, the same thing. So you want to make sure that there's access for air to get in and out. Moving on with draining the water out of boats, what we have here is an Albatross, an open cockpit OC1, and open cockpit meaning it's not sealed. So this whole area, this boat could fill up completely with water. So in order to drain these boats, there's actually two sections. There's the seat section, which also includes the front of the boat. You'd be able to see any water in there, so there's no mystery. And there's going to be water in there because you're going to splash if there's waves. Doesn't necessarily mean it's leaking. The back section has a couple of hatches, one here and here. This is your rudder hatch, and this is just an access hatch. This back section is separated with a bulkhead behind the seat. There should not be water in here. If there's water in this area, there's a leak. In order to drain the water out of here, you're going to have to open the hatch, and it probably should be the rear hatch, so you can get the water to one end, tip it up, just like we did with the surf ski. So, two areas to look for water. One area is going to be easy. The other area, not as easy. You're going to have to listen for it. Okay, we're going to talk for a couple of minutes about rigging an OC1 and an OC2. Some general comments. First, as we showed earlier, we want to make sure our rudder is safely up off the ground. And our boat is secure. Now, every boat has its own little nuances. Some rig better one way or another. But in general, and if you don't know what the best way to rig a particular boat is, the order of events is first, put the front, the Yaku, in the boat, and it doesn't matter whether you're in a hurricane, a fuse, a hooky, you slide it in or push it in, depending on the hooking mechanism. These particular boats use a cam lock. So the way you tighten this is once your Yaku is in, you just push the little lever down. This lever can come loose, so all you have to do is turn it. It tightens this bolt a little bit and then crimps back down. But you'd want to leave it loose until you get the AMA on, because you may have to move the AMA. You put the front one on, then the back, and then you go to the front to hook on the AMA. Your first one, and again, every type of boat is slightly different mechanism for getting it in. You just have to get it lined up, okay, and leave it loose. With the boats with a push pin, you can't leave it loose. But with the cam lock, we can leave it loose. Then we go to the rear and get that part in. And then go back and tighten it up. Now, a couple of comments. Some people have asked, not everyone's sure. What's the safest way to rig a boat in terms of paddling stability? What's the fastest way? There are two ways that you can determine the stability and the weight of the AMA on the water. One is how close the AMA is to the boat. Some boats have an adjustment that you can move the AMA in or out, or the Yaku in or out. The second way is how deep the Yaku goes into the AMA. Is it shallow? Is it deep? So in general, the closer the AMA is to the boat, and the higher the Yaku is in the AMA, the lighter the boat is. That means more tipping. If you want to go fast and have a lighter boat, you want it as light as possible, you want a tippy rigging. If you want a very stable rigging, you have the AMA push deep into, or the Yaku as deep into the AMA as you can, and as far away from the boat as you can. The opposite to that makes it light. The final thing, once you come off the water, after you've drained the water out of the boat, is we want to clean it. And what do we mean by that? We have a habit, and everybody's in the habit of spraying the boats down, and that's great. That gets some of the loose dirt, little plants and what have you that are on the boat and in the seat area. But it doesn't get rid of that little yellow scum line that we see on all of our boats. And that's really an organic stain, so it needs to be rubbed off. And if it's a fresh stain, you've just come off the water, you sprayed the boat down, you can easily rub that stain off with a rag or a sponge. If you let that stain dry and then someone else goes out and paddles and gets a little more of that stain on there, the next thing you know, we're going to need to use very harsh chemicals to remove the stain from that boat. So,
What's this? We have lots of pylons at the club for our kids' camps, and another great use of them is to stack them side by side to be your boat holder.
just a couple of words about paddle care. One is obvious, but I'd like to mention it again. Our good paddles, the carbon fiber paddles, should never be rested on hard ground, concrete, asphalt. If you happen to find yourself in the position where you're on the road and you have a paddle and want to put it down, put it on your toe or someone else's toe. What happens is we begin to get chips, and then you get water, then you get delamination, and you're going to see, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, Victoria.
Yep.
All right. And several of our paddles, many of them are adjustable, which is a great feature. There's also a drawback. They should be drained every time they're used. So you want to take the paddle apart, you want to drain them out. A couple of things happen when you leave water in the paddle. Eventually, it will break down the carbon fiber on the inside, and it'll just get worse and worse and worse and eventually break. The other thing that happens is because there's a fairly tight seal, if you have water in the paddle, you have a much smaller area of compressed air. And as that air expands, again, it can begin to delaminate the paddle from the inside out. So, separate them, drain them. You don't have to drain them dry, as long as we get most of the water out every time. And then when you put them back together, when you put them back into the paddle shack or the rack, close them right up. The shorter the paddle is, the safer it's going to store. If you leave it stretched out, people go to grab it, they're banging it on the top of the shed, onto racks and boats. So take it apart, put it back together. That's with the stand-up paddles. We also have a couple of kayak paddles that are adjustable as well. Same thing. Take them apart, drain them, put it back together.
Please prepare your equipment before you come to the dock. Wear your PFD, make sure you've got a leash, and bring your paddle. Attach your leash before you leave the dock. If you're on a SUP, it's super important, especially teaching new people, never to leave the dock on their feet and always to go on their knees at least 10 feet out and return to their knees 10 feet before the dock when they're returning. This is important in two major ways. The first one, most importantly, is that's the number one area where people get concussions, hitting the dock and falling forward onto the board or the dock. And secondly, that's the number one thing causing damage to the boards. Coming in too fast, not with your board under control. Stay on your knees, keep it under control, gently glide in, and all will be well. Safe paddling.